I'm about to create the world's smallest ecosystem pond, and I'm gonna turn this into this. Hey, what's up everybody? Ed the Pond Professor here. I am here at Aqualand. This is in St. Charles, Illinois, the water garden capital of the world, also our headquarters in front of our signature water feature that has over 600,000 gallons of water. Now you are used to me designing and building water features on this type of a scale. I'm talking massive. We just wrapped up the feature at Shaq O'Neill's place, which was a massive water feature. Today, we are doing something completely different. We're gonna go from massive down to a micro scale. I'm gonna do a water feature and an entire landscape that will fit in the palm of my hand. This is gonna be a really, really cool project. What I love about it, the geometries expand and contract. The processes, the way we do things can be done on any type of a scale. So I'm gonna start out with the exact same process that I normally would do for a water feature. I'm gonna come up with a design, I'm gonna mark it out actually on the ground. And in this case, instead of someone's backyard, I'm gonna mark it on a piece of clay and I'm gonna make a faint outline. Then I'm gonna start carving into the soil. Instead of an excavator, I'm gonna use tiny little carving tools that are gonna cut into the clay itself. I'm gonna take all that material that I remove, I'm gonna build up to create a bermed up area, which normally we would build a waterfall. Now, unfortunately for this particular project, not gonna be able to pull off a waterfall that actually works. Still gonna put in some big boulders to replicate the look of a waterfall, but it's not gonna actually be a flowing waterfall. But we will have water. We're gonna have rocks, we're gonna have gravel, we're gonna have sand, we're actually gonna have small pieces of wood just to mimic the natural logs that you know I love to put in all my water features. And then after that, we may actually have to figure out what to put inside this pond. That's part of a different story. What I wanna focus on today is designing and building a really incredible water feature as well as entire landscape that fits right in my hand. So I'm gonna build this entire landscape right in the middle of this. So I'm gonna start out with a clay material. So this is gonna allow me to grade everything off and I'll be able to create a base to work with. Then I'm gonna carve into it using these different tools. So these are just different clay carving tools that I could actually sculpt and cut into the clay material itself. I also have a series of brushes just for cleaning things up, but they're also gonna be used for applying the rubberized material, which is going to make this water feature watertight. There's no possible way I was gonna be able to use a rubber liner because the thickness of it is so thick compared to the overall scale. There's no way it would conform to the different configurations that I'm digging in my pond. Remember, I'm going to be doing all the same exact ledges and things like that I would normally do on any one of my water features. Then I have all of my other raw materials. Normally, you're going to see me getting boulders delivered in a dump truck. Today, I'm delivering all of my big boulders that are barely a quarter of a shot glass full of large rocks. So I have my large boulders, my small, my river sand for the bottom. I actually have some crushed slate, which is gonna be for a walkway that's leading to our own private deck. In and around all my water features, you know I've used all types of logs and stumps and stuff like that. This time I'm using some mossy covered twigs and sticks. I also have some beautiful mosses as well as some small plants that are typically used in small terrariums and things like that. We'll continue to go into more depth as I build the world's tiniest pond. Just finished my excavation, got my little carving tool. What I love about this is it's the exact same creative process. I have the small little deck area, so that's the main viewing point. I took all the soil, I made my little ledges for the different levels, which is really important to give it more aesthetic appeal, but it also fits with the scale of the boulders. Added in a small shallow beach area. I used all the soil that I dug out from everything to build up the surrounding area. This is going to mimic my little waterfall area. I also added a secondary planting area because the goal, again, thinking on a bigger scale, what's the overall look gonna be? So high vegetation back over here where the waterfall is gonna be, kind of a secondary mound just to kind of bring all this into scale, and then a slow kind of vista going off into the distance. So we're always thinking of all these views, and no matter what the scale, that's what I love about this. If it's a tiny little thing like this or a massive backyard, same exact processes have been used on all of those features. For the sake of following along with the steps, I'm gonna put in a waterproof barrier instead of a rubber sheet. I'm gonna put a liquid material that will cure to create a waterproof membrane. Then we'll cover it up with many, many pounds or ounces or milligrams of rock, gravel, sand, and then we'll fill this thing up with water. Something that's always fascinated me from a scientific perspective is the concept of fractals, which is basically expanding geometries. Giant things or micro things, they follow the same patterns. Nature is very, very unique in that fact. Just look at this. What I want to point out, 2 leaves off of the same tree, both off of this maple, but in this little tiny one, you can see all these beautiful little veins inside of there. Those veins, that main structure itself is repeated not only in this tree, the same exact leaf, just different ages, but it also can be found in nature in many other forms. Think of the human body, our lung system, all the little alveoli and the little airways that go through everything, the artery system in our body. It is very similar to this. This is an effective method for bringing dissolved nutrients, blood, oxygen, resources to various living things. This could also be seen in nature. If you've ever taken a plane, you've gone over a coastal area, and if you see a river system that empties into the ocean, you're gonna have that delta area. That delta is going to be very similar to this. You're going to have that main branch of water. It's going to split off into all these thousands of little streams and rivulets that are going to dissipate off into the ocean. These patterns can be found everywhere, and that's what I love about science, and that's what I love about this project. It doesn't matter on the scale. We could expand it by having larger boulders or tiny little micro ones. Everything functions the same. So our rubber membrane is cured, and as you can see, I'm ready to start installing all the stone. I'm gonna start taking my rocks, and I'm gonna start in the deepest portion first, and then I work my way systematically from the bottom all the way out, and then the finishing touches are gonna be the fine sand material that's gonna go in between all the larger stones. So I'm gonna start out by taking some of these guys right here. I'm not used to working with tiny little pinchers like this. Usually I'm using the jaws, the opposable thumb that's set up on an excavator or giant lifting straps, but the thumb actually works. And so today this is my thumb system. So I'm going to start placing these rocks down here in the bottom, that deepest zone. I'm going to start working my way up and out, one stone at a time, no matter what. Again, I could probably, start dumping rock in here, but it would look like a big pile of dumped rocks. I'm going to twist them and turn them a little bit to make sure they hold in place. Look at that little guy does not want to sit. That happens with big ones as well. Oh, wish me luck. So just like bigger boulders, you can see how they're gonna sit, and they have angles on them. So I'm gonna take that and I'm gonna flip it so it's gonna wanna roll backwards into the hillside. Hopefully that'll stabilize. So normally I would be building a waterfall here. We're far enough along where I want to place the deck into position. So it's going to kind of cantilever over that edge a little bit. Now I have to blend in a couple more rocks on this edge, and then we can come in with our sand and start pushing that all in between everything. So we're at a good moment. We have all the rocks in the pond. We also did the fine sand in the bottom, added a few of those little wooden elements. You've heard me talk about this before. I want to have a variety of different surfaces. All these different surfaces are going to grow different types of microorganisms, and different things are going to want to associate themselves with those different surfaces. All these different things are very important to create biodiversity. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in, I have to dig some holes, but they need to just be deep holes. I can't come in with my current excavation tool, which was this little guy. I wouldn't be able to go down deep enough. I'm just gonna move it by hand, and I'm gonna bore small holes into the clay, so then I could start taking apart my plants piece by piece. I could plant them, put some soil around them, and then I'm gonna start finishing off with the fine mosses and all the other small details. Good. Now we got to go down to the baby steers. We're going to systematically go from big, medium to the small, and then I still have to do a walkway. Why? I have no idea, but I'm going to do a walkway. So the idea with this really, really fine moss is to make it look like kind of grass. Not necessarily like a mowed grass, but kind of like patchy, like a buffalo grass. So part of my biofalls and planting scheme, I'm always looking for moss, and we're over at a friend's farm right down the road from us. And I remember looking at this before. They had all these little clumps of moss growing inside of this old concrete feeding trough, but it's gonna be perfect. What I like about it, instead of taking moss off of soil or of a plant material, this is coming off of concrete. You know, this water kind of just sits inside of this trough. So this should actually grow really well on top of rock. So we go from all the different scales. We have the wooden element, we have the deck, we have some logs in there, we have some of the big rocks, the smaller rocks, and then the fine river sand. We brought in this club moss, which actually mimics like some large trees. And then we have the baby's tears. I mean, normally these guys are the smallest things that you're gonna use in a terrarium or small garden like this, but in this application, they look like shrubs. And again, look at the texture difference, going down from a different color, as well as that finer texture to mimic that grass. So I'm just gonna tuck in a few more pieces around this edge. So we are now gonna fill up the pond. Don't wanna use chlorinated water. I'm gonna use pond water. So this came out of one of our ponds. You could actually see some of the detritus down there in the bottom. So that is officially the world's smallest pond. Hope you enjoyed this really, really unique project. I love designing and building things, and this one actually pushed me a little bit because all the attention to detail, it's so tiny. Working with all the tiny little rocks, sculpting everything out and trying to shrink things, which is why I love talking about fractals, that concept of expanding geometry, making things really, really big or really, really small. The concepts are actually the same. Starting out with the excavation, carving in all those little levels, building up all that soil just like I normally would, creating these different elevations to create some visual interest as well as different areas for different types of animals. Once we start layering everything in place, then I can start to visualize what everything's gonna look like. We have that little cantilever deck coming out over the edge, all the stonework going around the perimeter, which actually took me quite a long time just because it was so small and tiny to work with. Once the rocks are in place, layering in all the different pieces of sand, then adding in the driftwood and the pieces of wood to kind of round out that ecosystem. The final pieces coming in with the large plants that are actually kind of hanging over, creating that little bit of a canopy, coming down to that intermediate layer of the baby's tears, which are mimicking some dense shrubbery going around the perimeter, and then topping it all off with that fine little moss. The biggest challenge I have is there's so little water inside of here that the water is actually getting sucked up through the beach. I could actually see it, and it's getting wicked up into the moss itself, which is actually great for the moss. The problem is I might need to tweak this design a little bit and come up with a way to actually recirculate it and filter it. And if I can do that, then I'm gonna have a constant feed of new water coming in, which might be a little bit of a challenge at this point, but it's some really cool stuff for me to think about. And then the final step, which I'm totally looking forward to, is adding life into this pond. No pond is complete without having some sort of life. Once we have the water in place, life is going to want to flourish. What I want to do is I want to start it out fresh. I added pond water into the system, so it's actually aged already. It has the micronutrients. It doesn't have chlorine or anything like that that will harm microorganisms. So what I want to do is go hunting for little cool micro creatures that'll actually find this place home. So this type of stuff reminds me of my buddy Tanner Serpa. So if you like this, definitely check out the project that we built a couple of years ago now, but you could get some great inspiration. So stay tuned because this project is going to keep getting better and better.